Hey, welcome to the Insurance Buzz. This is your host, Michael and Courtney Weaver, and we have a special guest today, Enneagram expert, our friend and rock star, Miss Tracy O'Malley. Tracy, how are you?
Hi, guys. I just love you two so much. I'm so fired up for today.
I am so pumped. So I want to share the story of how Tracy and I connected. So we were in a mastermind together. And one of the things that we had to do was we had to take the microphone and we had to give this like 90-second who we are, what our skill sets are, and a little bit about us. So I go to the front of the room. Of course, I grab the microphone. I'm like, hyped. And as I'm walking,
that's so shocking.
As I'm walking back, you grab my hand, you turn and look at me and you said, "You're an Enneagram 3, aren't you?" I'm like, "Oh my God, yes, I am." I had no idea who you were or what you did, but you called it right away. So I am so excited to always share you with the world because you have such a gift of really seeing people and seeing how their strengths and even the things that they're working through, how they can leverage those. So that's what we want to talk about. We want to talk about the Enneagram and really how it plays in business and in life. So how did you get into the Enneagram? That's what I want to know first.
Well, before I say that, when you were telling that story, it hit me about my own evolution with the beauty of the Enneagram, because in true transparency, I think not just me, but most people are very envious of the Enneagram 3. And you both are that. And when we usually have envy, my go-to was judgment in the past and projection, right? And looking back at all the people in my life that have triggered me, irritated me, who I found most judgment towards was the Enneagram 3 personality. And I think in grabbing you in that moment was also a moment for me of my own growth and evolution, that instead of envy and judgment for what you guys put on as the show, right? It's your gift. God, you're just so gifted in inspiring us all. And it was in that moment with you that I love being surrounded by Enneagram 3s, especially Enneagram 3s that are in it for the greatest good, not just for the show. So thank you for sharing that. It hit me as you were telling that story about my part in that and my growth in being surrounded with quality humans like you. So thanks.
Thank you.
Love you. Okay, so how did I get into the Enneagram? Well, kicking and screaming is how I came into the Enneagram. I am an Enneagram 8. We are known as the active controller or the challenger. So just that name alone kind of tells you I don't just go with anything that is told to me, right? I will fight against anything and everything, especially if it's going to put me in a vulnerable situation or where I might be perceived as weak. And over 10 years ago, it's exactly where I was in my life. I was at pretty much the rock bottom. On paper, I looked great, but I knew differently. And my coping mechanisms weren't great. I was filled with coping mechanisms of alcohol dysfunction, eating disorders, codependency, anger management issues, everything but drugs, basically, I've used to cope with emotions. And, I had teenagers at the time, they're in their mid-20s now, but back in the day, they were, the early teens, where you can see very clearly, it's a very humbling moment as a parent. If you don't repair it, it gets repeated. And I started to see certain behaviors in both of my children who are very different than me. It was mirroring some of the things I was doing. And just like, coaching or parenting or leadership, they do what you do, not what you say to do. And I didn't want that for them, because here I was at the time at 40 years old with a bunch of I was repeating exactly what was taught, told, and modeled for me, even though it was the last thing I wanted. And so it was then that I was like, I need help. And even though everybody in my environment at the time was like, "You're great, you're fantastic," they were enabling me to stay in that ego, in that projection, in the denial and everything. But I knew that there was a bigger calling on my life. And so I checked myself into rehab, and all those coping mechanisms, I put them all on the table. I didn't hide any of them. And I told my therapist in rehab, I'm like, I know I'm here for the alcohol problem, but there's all this other shit that you need to know about because I'll end up using these if you take the alcohol away from me.
Yeah.
And it was on day 2 in rehab that my therapist, who I still see to this day, she introduced me to the Enneagram. She wanted me to take this assessment. I told her to F off. I said, I don't need another label. I don't need any box to put me in. And she's a straight shooting Enneagram 8 from Texas and said, my dear, your best thinking has gotten you here. And this might help you get out of the box that not only you've put yourself in, but the world has also put you in. And so it was in that journey that the Enneagram really gave me a roadmap out of my own dysfunction, right? And with compassion and empathy and grace, because even though I have this very strong kind of prowess, let's say, underneath it all, I am very sensitive and hard on myself. And the Enneagram provided a compassionate lens, first for myself. And once I was doing that for myself, miraculously, I was able to have compassion and empathy for everyone else, especially those that hurt me, that had betrayed me, and turned their back on me. And when I felt that, I was like, wow, okay, that's a first. I was like, maybe it's just like this rehab thing, but it wasn't, because I got out of rehab and then had to apply a lot of this in real life. And the first place I tested this was in my home team, right? My 2 kids. And you can imagine coming out of rehab, my track record probably wasn't great and wasn't met with a lot of credibility and trust, right? Even though my kids love me and, you know, they respect me, I'm sure they were waiting for the other shoe to drop when mama got home. And with the tool of the Enneagram in rehab, I recognized that, oh my gosh, I only speak this Enneagram 8 language, but I am mothering an Enneagram 2 and an Enneagram 7. And no wonder whatever I'm saying and however I am intending it, it's not landing on their hearts the way that I intend. And intention is like one thing, but like you have to have some like care and compassion on the other end. Like, how can I communicate this in a way that they receive it? Not like, too bad, this is how I am, deal with it, which is how I operated for the first 40 years. But I just started tweaking the way that I communicated to each of them individually, and everything in my household changed overnight. Everything. And that was a strong enough testimony for me to dig a little deeper into the Enneagram. And that was over 10 years ago. And so now, you know, I've used it to build $1 million sales organizations myself. I've helped others do it. I've gone into other teams and corporations because it is a beautiful communication tool. Because when we can speak in a way of what's in it for them, whether it's personally or professionally, everyone wins. Everyone wins. And I'm all for that today. So that's how I got into it. It's crazy because my therapist and I, you know, I still see her to this day, and she's like, it is unbelievable what you are doing with this. I'm like, I know, you remember. She goes, yeah, that robust ego of yours was like not having it. But it's a true testament to when we surrender to maybe our best ways of thinking, we can learn a hell of a lot. And to now call this my passion, my purpose, and what I get to do day in and day out, excitedly, I mean, my goodness, I can only imagine if I had stayed stubborn in that.
Love that. So Tracy, what is an Enneagram? Like what is it?
God, I hate this question every time because because this is where my own insecurities come out, because there are a lot of great information teachers out there. You probably, after this episode, will find all of the great information teachers of the Enneagram out there. And I'm not knocking any of them. They're awesome. They're very into the history of it. And I'm a bottom line me kind of girl, right? What is the Enneagram? It's a personality system framework. It is not a label. It is not a fun, cutesy online quiz thing. It is not any of that. It is next to my faith, my friends, is the most powerful tool I use in everything I do. And so it basically runs on 9 different archetypes that we can embody all of them. And that actually is the goal. The more growing we do, the more healing we do, the more open we are to the process, the ability we have to really tap into all 9 archetypes. But one is home for all of us, right? There's one of the 9 types that is home for us. And how I kind of explain this is it's like nature and nurture collide, right? I do believe we have this divine blueprint And I've carried 2 babies in my body, and I know they are very different in personality, in utero, as well as outside in the world at 25 and 26 years old. And then we're dropped into families and systems and experiences that can alter how that divine blueprint and soul blueprint gets expressed, right? And the gift in the Enneagram is really unpacking and moving out some of the wreckage that piled onto that soul makeup. And so we can start expressing who we are. But how I like to really explain is we have this intuition, right? But so often we don't operate in that because of those experiences, because of the things we were taught, told, and modeled. And so even when intuition hits, we bypass it. And for each of us, we go into a very distinct area of what that looks like. And those are called the centers of intelligence on the Enneagram. So the Enneagram is a big circle. The 9 types are all around there. Those 9 types are then put into 3 different categories. And if you know nothing else about the Enneagram, the centers of intelligence are what I really want you to focus on, because even if you land and you understand what center of intelligence people fall into, this will lead you so much faster to a win-win situation personally and professionally with people. So we have the 3 centers of intelligence. And when we bypass the intuition, wherever your core Enneagram type that does not change falls into is where you go. So for the 8s, 9s, and 1s that are at the top of the Enneagram diagram, those 3 types operate on instincts first, right? After intuition, their first go-to is instinct. Present time, what's in front of me right now. Instinct is very different than intuition. Instinct is about a reaction to something. Intuition is a divine inner knowing. Right. So for the 8s, 9s, and 1s, they go into instincts. What's happening right here, right now, present time. And their underlying kind of motive is about independence, autonomy, and control and truth. And if I reverse engineer everything that motivates me, absolutely, that's what it's about. That's why when people were trying to dangle a carrot for me, like, hey, do this and you'll receive this, I don't care. Here, do this and you can speak on this stage. I don't care. But here, do this and you'll have lifetime of independence and autonomy. Sign me up.
Yeah.
That's why network marketing, when I was in it, was very appealing to me. Not for the flashy, hypey shit, but because I could build residual income that could last a lifetime. I'm here for it. So the 8, 9, and 1, independence, autonomy, control, and truth. Now, how it looks for all 3 is very, very different. Like the 8 is very external with it. The 9 is kind of passive with it. And the 1s are kind of internal with their desire for that. The underlying emotion for all 3 is anger. And again, how that looks for all 3 types, very, very different. 8s are very external. It's why 8s are the most mistyped on the Enneagram. 9s shut it down. They have it, but you will never see it unless you really, really push them. And then 1s internal with the anger. But that instinct is very, very real. Now we use all 3 of the centers of intelligence, right? And depending on kind of where you fall and your framework and your level of health in the wings, which that's for a whole nother episode, where we go next is very dependent on who you are, right? So in the feeling center of intelligence, which is where you 2 go, you kind of go into the past, right? The 2, 3, and 4 need significance. That's the motive for everything that you guys do. Now,
oh, yes.
And how that looks for the 2, 3, and 4 is very, very different, right? The 2 seek significance in what they do for others because they want to be loved and appreciated. The 3s, you 2, both find significance in what you do, what you achieve, or how you appear in the world. And the 4s find significance internally, this constant quest to be their most genuine, authentic self, right? The underlying emotion for all 3 of those types is shame. Again, very, very different appearing for all 3 of you. The 2s are more external with it. The 3s shut it down. Like you'll never see a 3 in active shame unless you live with them. And even then they'll kind of mask it with stuff, right? But it's there. You guys know that. And then the 4s internalize it. But that past thinking, like you're looking for the receipts of like, what did I do last time in order for me to gain significance? Or what didn't work last time? Right. And that's kind of where the 2s, 3s, and 4s go first. Okay. And in the final center of intelligence reside the 5, the 6, and the 7. Now, all 3 of those are forward thinkers. Like their first reaction when they bypass their intuition is, but what's going to happen in the future? What's going to happen in the future? What's going to happen in the future? So their underlying emotion is fear or anxiety. When they're forward thinkers, they're anticipating what could happen, right? Where you guys, what did happen? And for me, it's like, what's happening, right? What's happening right now? But for the 5, 6, and 7, they all have a need for certainty. Fives need certainty that they are going to be equipped with resources and energy and that they're capable. The 6s need certainty that they are prepared and not going to be blindsided. And the 7s need certainty that all options are available to them at all times. I know your bestie is a 7.
Yeah.
Like, they need options. Don't try to put them in a box. And with that fear and anxiety, when you start to push against their certainty, which whatever that looks like for all 3, the 5s internalize that anxiety. Very rarely will you see a 5 in active fear because they go isolate. The 6s are more vocal and external with their fear and anxiety when, a blindside's coming or they're fearing a worst case scenario. Or if you try to put a 7 into a box, they bolt, they scatter. That's their way of not feeling it, is like, let's go on to the next shiny object. Or that's their bypass. So if you don't understand anything about the Enneagram, the centers of intelligence are the secret sauce. And it's what I did probably for the first 5 years of using the Enneagram. Nobody knew that was the tool I was using. Nobody heard me talk about the Enneagram the first 5 years I was using it, because I was so understanding the centers of intelligence. I was like, okay, let me just figure out where they fall, so I can speak to either significant certainty or independence and autonomy first. And when you start speaking to what motivates somebody, you earn credibility and trust, and you can lead them more effectively. So I know you asked what the Enneagram is, but like, that's the real magic of it. It has like ancient history and all that fluff. But I know if you're listening right now, you want to know what's in it for you. And that's what's in it for you with the Enneagram.
So before we dive into this more, I want to know the why. So why this over like DISC or Wonderlic or Myers-Briggs? 'Cause Courtney and I are obviously huge believers in this, just because of getting to know you and then doing our own research, finding out. I think it's the most powerful tool out there, but I want to hear your reasoning for why.
And I love all of them. I'm here, since I was a little girl and growing up the way that I grew up, I couldn't understand why people were the way they were, why they were hurtful, or why, I wanted to understand the why to a lot of things. And as a little girl, it didn't make sense. And so I am open to all the things. The reason the Enneagram over everything else, and I love Myers-Briggs, I love DISC, I love astrology, I love tarot, I love anything.
Same.
I mean, I'm Irish too. So I'm like, okay, what's like ancient Irish history on this shit? Like, yeah, check.
Samesies.
Yeah.
Right? However, all of those things are more about the behaviors. And if the diet industry tells us anything, we all know to be healthy, we have to put the proper stuff in the body and move it properly, and move it, in a way that serves the vessel that we have, right? Not what, Susie on Instagram has. And the thing is we know the behaviors we should be doing, but do we? No, because we want the ho-ho, or we want to take the shot of tequila, or we want to get horizontal with Netflix, right? We want to do all those things. But if we get to the motive behind why we're doing those things, why we're checking out, that's what I'm here for. Because all the other things are great for behaviors, but we have learned how to behaviorally be acceptable in all situations. We have become human chameleons so often, to get the significance, the certainty, or the independence. But if we don't get to the root of why we do what we do, we're just kind of kicking the can down the street. We're slapping a Band-Aid on it. And the first time the real wound gets nicked, you're going to bleed out. And why the Enneagram is so powerful is any single time something happens in my life. And, before we hit record, I was talking very candidly about a friendship divorce I've been going through. I am so proud of how I've handled that, because 10 years ago, the girl would be dead 6 feet under, quite honestly. But today, because I know why it hurt so bad, is at the root of my Enneagram type, and I can navigate that. I can navigate that so much better because I know the motive behind it. I know the motive behind my hurt. I know the motive behind my anger. And I don't have to like deflect to that. I can get to, why does this hurt? Oh, this hurts because of this. Yeah, she did some things that were shady and wrong. What's my part in it as well? What was my part in it? And that's why the Enneagram, when you have the roadmap to understand all the joy, all the anger, all the sadness, all of it, you can get to the root of things faster, use it for something great, even the hard things that are happening in your life, and you can move it into something magical. You really, really can. That's why the Enneagram. That's why. It's powerful.
So powerful. And I think you touch on something when you think about like significance, or you're talking about instinct and thinking forward. You talked about those three things, but I want to talk about the Enneagram and their subtypes and that, and how, because Michael, I'm an obvious Enneagram 3, and that is one that I think gets put on this, like Enneagram 3s are this. I think sometimes we like adjust okay, this is a good one or a bad one.
Right.
Why don't you just break us down?
So yeah, talk to us, because we're two different Enneagram 3s. I actually think Enneagram 3s are probably the saddest of all the Enneagrams, because it's this constant seeking of like validation.
Yeah.
But I want to break down the subtypes, because Michael was mistyped as 1.
Yeah. The self-preservation 3, which is what Michael is very often mistyped as another type. Because that you are kind of the poster child of what an Enneagram 3 looks like, like here I am, I'm stealing the show, and you come by it beautifully. Like it's your gift. Like you inspire us all. We've also seen unhealthy versions of the Enneagram 3 doing that. Like, look at me, screw all of you kind of thing. That's not you. Right. But like the 3 instincts in Enneagram language. So for each Enneagram type, whether you're a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, there's 3 different kinds of each of them. So like we operate in 3s here, like the 3 centers of intelligence, and there's 3 types in each center of intelligence. And then there's 3 different types within each Enneagram type. And these are our instinctual drives, our animal drives. And this is what we call in Enneagram language, the subtypes. They operate in all 3 of us. We obviously have a self-preservation part of us that's fight or flight, right? We have the social aspect, which is like how we operate in communities and the world. And then the one-on-one or sexual subtype. This is how we interact in intimate relationships. Right. And for each of us, one of those dominates, and they kind of stack. And these can kind of be interchangeable, where your core type doesn't, where these kind of get stacked can change the game a little bit. So Mike, as a self-preservation type, they focus their attention, their first go-to as a 3. And this is where the passion and the instinct kind of can take on a different look. It's why it looks very different for you too. So a 3 needing significance, but that self-preservation aspect of Michael is safety, security, comfort. Mm-hmm. And the self-preservation type, their first instinct is, how's this going to affect me? It doesn't mean they're selfish or self-absorbed or anything, but because of history in their life, that's where they usually had to go most of their life, is how's this going to affect me? Or, what's going on around me where this is going to affect me. Right. I definitely, this is my secondary one. When it comes to finances, like I'm self-preservation to the core. And a lot of that has to do with my upbringing, So for the social instinctual type, so for you, it's like, how is this going to affect we as the collective? Like, and you, Courtney, are all about the greatest good for us all. And that's why you guys are a freaking great partnership too. Like you're driven very similarly, but your first instinct is very, very different. And it's why collectively, when you guys are working together, holy crap, all the, boxes are checked as far as taking care of all the things that need to be taken care of. Right. So that social instinct focuses attention and shapes behavior around belonging, recognition, relationships, and social groups, which is really important. Right. Mm-hmm. It's my kind of blind spot, or was, early on in my life, I didn't care about that. I was like, put me in my bubble, my safe little cave, and I'm good. Right. And that's where we go to the one-on-one type, which is also called the sexual type. It doesn't mean like sex as an act, but like that intimacy, right? And the one-on-one types focus attention and shapes behavior around issues related to the quality and status of relationships with specific individuals. That's my go-to. And now, like looking back at my life, the way that I grew up, that makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense growing up in an alcoholic home where I had this surrogate kind of spouse situation with my father. Like everything about my world was contingent on how dad was, right? So that is my natural instinct most of the time, but we can always stack into the other things. But you can imagine if you take the instinct with the passion of each Enneagram type, how that can drastically change how it gets expressed. So if Mike, you are in safety, security, and comfort, and Courtney's all about, community and recognition and belonging, even with the passion of the three being significance and being the best at what they are doing, that looks very, very different.
Mm-hmm.
And so understanding the instinctual response is why 65 to 70% of the time when you take an online Enneagram assessment, it's inaccurate because it doesn't take that into consideration. And that's the problem with the Enneagram. But I have a solution for that. So
you do have a solution for that. And I'm excited. We have a discount code too, and we'll drop that in the show notes because you've created a full expansive blueprint based on the quiz that they take that really kind of dials in, because I think if you are mistyped as an Enneagram and you identify with that, that can become something that morphs and doesn't work in your favor.
Well, think about it. When you use the GPS on your phone or in your car, if you punch in the wrong coordinates, you're not getting to where you want to go. And that is frustrating and creates road rage and all sorts of things, and fighting with your co-pilot. The Enneagram is a roadmap and a GPS system to your soul. And so using, and like you guys said, this is a powerful, powerful tool. So you want to use it, but you got to have the right information. You got to have the right coordinates for you. Because I originally was mistyped as a 3. And behaviorally, I can see why. Like on paper, I can look very 3-like, especially if my independence and autonomy is at stake. Nobody will beat me if it's at stake, but it's not motivated like a 3. Right. And there were times, girlfriend, that I wanted to be a 3 so damn bad. And I've tried and it doesn't work and it's painful, and damn it, I want to be a 3 in the worst way. But if I just want to be that, but I'm using your GPS, it is a disaster waiting to happen. And I'll burn out my body. I'll burn out relationships. I will get angry. I will quit. I will self-sabotage, all the things. So you got to have the right information to use this tool. You have to. And here's the thing. I get people that are listening right now. If I had known what the hell I was doing, I would have definitely studied the Enneagram and answered accordingly to get the type that I wanted. And I probably did, even though I didn't know what I was doing. I was answering as though I didn't have any problems as I was sitting in rehab. And so here I am getting typed as an Enneagram 3. Of course, I'm the competitive achiever as I sit in rehab, right? I'm not saying 3s can't end up in rehab, but that's the part of these assessments that can be problematic, especially with high achievers, is we know how to compartmentalize our life. And that's part of the problem, right? We need to know who we are at our soul level so that we can really leverage all the beauty in us and also leverage all the things that are challenging to us. That's how we know how to surround ourselves with and maybe where to work on more. So getting the right information is key.
Yeah. And I think you bring up a lot of it is your blind sides. Like, what's your blind spot in being an Enneagram 5 or being an Enneagram 9? Like, who do you need to surround yourself? And I think this is where it comes into play, not only understanding where you're not as strong, but also how to communicate with people around you in a way that they understand and that they're language that is motivating to them. And I think that's really where your work, I mean, you've worked with Google, you've worked with John Deere, you work with tons of corporations and sales organizations. Talk a little bit about how that looks from like a leadership, or how we can implement that in our businesses.
God is such a game changer. Like, obviously, like, the most important team I have is my home team. And what I saw it do for not just my leadership, but both of my adult children and how they lead in our home. Like they lead in beautiful ways individually in our home because they both bring something to the table I do not have. And even though I'm mom and, large and in charge around here, like I am not unwilling to learn from, a 25 and 26-year-old. So the leadership first and foremost in my home is amazing. And we're all better because of that. Now in leadership professionally, that was another place I saw it. Because when I was starting network marketing, which I didn't want to do that either, but independence and autonomy was really like, barking at my door here. And that was a very quick, easy way without a big investment on the front end to do it. And I knew that I have a very strong personality, but that strong personality in the past had me only really talking to people just like me. And that's a shit show, quite honestly. You have too many of me in one room and it's like Fight Club. It's not necessarily a great thing. And so using this, I was able to like speak what was in it for them, for all the sales leaders in that organization. And now, a decade later, there's 7 millionaires in that organization represented by 6 different Enneagram types. And not one of them is an 8 like me. Right. But it was because I was able to speak what motivated them. I could address the fears that they didn't know that I knew that they had. And again, that builds credibility and trust. Now, within any corporate structure, not just a sales organization like I have, when you have a CEO, let's say, who has a certain Enneagram type. So Steve Jobs, for an example, he's mistyped all the time as an Enneagram 1, which we can see they're the perfectionist, right? We can see a lot of his rigid perfectionist behaviors, but he was actually an Enneagram 7, which is that visionary, ironically, a 7 under stress can look like a 1, right? Mm-hmm. But you think about somebody like Steve Jobs, who did he surround himself with? Steve Wozniak, right? Very, very different personality. Like if you had 2 Steve Jobs in a room, never going to work very well as far as a leadership level. Yep. So I'm not saying 2 of the same type can't lead effectively together, because you guys are a perfect example of that. But that instinct is a big, big thing. In another organization that I've worked with, Fortune 100 company, 2 of the top executive leaderships had the same Enneagram type and subtype, and it didn't work. They couldn't get past it. There was like too many chiefs, not enough Indians. It wasn't working. Like no, like power struggle, things like that. And one of them couldn't get past it. Right. But using this framework, when I'm working with bigger teams or a CEO that is like all about growth, I'm like, listen, this is what you are. This is who you need to surround yourself with. This is what, your ego is going to have to put aside to learn from these people. And the more that you're able to kind of humble yourself enough to know, like, you don't have it all figured out. I don't care how great you are. You have a blind spot, period, end of story. We all do. I know what mine is. And so I'm surrounded by people who will help you bring that to the surface for me in a nurturing, loving way. And when you're in, a corporate environment, especially if you're somebody who is wanting to grow your team and grow your impact and grow your profits and productivity and purpose and passion, you have to be able to allow everyone to be seen, heard, understood, and valued for who they are. Because if you don't, you will lose them, period. You will lose them every time. People leave jobs, not necessarily because of the money or the carrot you dangle. It's about the growth opportunity, and if they feel like they're valued and seen and understood for the gifts that they bring to the table. Mm-hmm. You also providing them their own kind of roadmap for their blind spots, and that you are seeing their blind spots so they don't have to hide them all the time. It's like, we know what they are. There's nothing wrong with you if you have a blind spot, because we're humans. But how can we support you in a way that makes you learn from that or grow into that? So you don't feel like you're running scared all the time. I think a lot of us are running scared as grown-ass adults. It's like, God, I don't want anybody to see that, like, this is my blind spot. And it wasn't until I really revealed, this is my blind spot. I will always have it, but I'm going to meet it with love and compassion. And every opportunity that comes my way where that gets kind of triggered is just an opportunity. And in leadership, when you create a culture and an environment that is open to learning about that, with a safe place to grow into it, there's no stopping what your team and organization can do. No matter if you're selling insurance, selling shakes, creating systems and software, or, anything. anything. When you have a team around you, that's where we make the biggest impact. And communication is the biggest struggle in any kind of team building. Yep. It isn't talent. It isn't talent. It isn't treasure. It isn't any of that. It's communication. And this is a great tool for allowing us all to communicate more effectively.
No, I love this because, yeah, I know we're talking a lot about corporate America right now, but I think this is even more critical in a small business environment because
without question,
you are around each other all the time. You're around your coworkers more than you're around your family. Like it's communication is key. And I think that's the difference in winning cultures. Those winning cultures a lot of times have better communication than those that may not be winning, or those that are stagnant or complacent or just feel like a terrible place to work.
Well, and especially in smaller organizations and teams, you can't hide. In a bigger corporate team, when I was in corporate America all of 3 years, which is all I could have lasted, I could hide behind so much crap. And because it was just too messy, they didn't want to deal with it, right? But in a smaller team and organization, you have to leverage every single human for their gifts and their blind spots. And the more that you know with compassion and honor for each other, the more that you will get out of your people. There's a reason why I've only had maybe 1-2 people working for me in 10 years. I don't love working with a lot of people because I'm an 8 and it's just challenging because I'm afraid of betrayal and violation all the times. But I've created a culture that no matter who is in my circle working with and for me, they're here for the long haul and for the master vision. And I get so much more out of them. Not using them in that way, but like, because I'm building their confidence because I'm like, hey, this is what you're great at. I see this. It's not what I'm great at. Please take some autonomy and initiative and just go for it. And because I won't second guess a lot of it, I might have something to say, but I'm able to get a lot more out of, I get a lot more juice out of the orange, let's just say, because of that. And there are so many of you that are depleting your resources because you're hiring too many or too many people or the wrong people. And you're needing more oranges because you're only getting a little bit of juice out of each one, where I'd much rather have 2 oranges and get every ounce of juice out of it and have not just more energy, because managing a lot more people is energetic bankruptcy just waiting to happen. Right. And, I want a plentiful resource pool. I really, really do. And when I'm working with a lot less, that's called working smarter, not harder. This can help you do that as well. For sure.
Yeah. And I think this tool, would you use this when you're getting ready to hire somebody? Like if you have an applicant, would you have them take this? Can this affect your hiring decision? Especially in our field, it's very heavily sales based. Are there certain Enneagram types that you find work best in a sales organization and some that work best for more customer relations and customer service? Or is it based on the person? Can you use this kind of framework in that aspect?
Well, HR kind of rules. And I don't that's why I strongly recommend whoever's in leadership and making the decisions, understanding the centers of intelligence is really, really important. That way you don't have to say, hey, I want you to take this Enneagram assessment, which I know HR people are probably like cringing right now. And I totally get it. And it's why I was able to use the Enneagram without anyone knowing for 5 years, because I got so skilled at asking the right questions to narrow down. So I had an idea where they fell on the Enneagram enough to know like, okay. And I would just ask certain questions to kind of figure out, okay, where's their biggest fear at? Where's their biggest motivator at? And once I landed and could speak to that, I was like, oh, okay. As far as hiring, a lot of times I'm called in as the final interview, quite honestly, because I don't talk about the Enneagram, but I know the questions I'm asking. And I know, especially because the people that are hiring a certain role, they want a certain kind of person. But what happens is we end up hiring people we like instead of the people that we need, or we have our own blind spot. Yeah.
Guilty.
Who hasn't done it? And a mutual friend of ours had me do that for her. And she had 2 of her final candidates. I'm like, okay, this is what I got out of this one. She goes, oh my gosh, how did you get that out of her? I never saw that in 4 interviews. I'm like, well, I know the questions to ask to get there.
Yeah.
Right. I'm like, do not hire her. She's a great person, but not great for you. I said, you'll be enabling her and then you'll have resentment and then it'll be a whole thing. right? But again, like you have to hire for what you need, not necessarily what you like. And typically what we need are the things that trigger us the most, because they definitely nick at where we aren't, nick at the things that where we're not strong. And we don't want people to see that, especially if we're in this authority position. But you're doing a disservice not only to you and your leadership, but the growth of your organization and team as well. So I do highly recommend being skillful enough and curious enough in your questioning to ask the questions to kind of narrow it down, or you bring in somebody like me who you trust, that I know what you need and I know what you want, and I will make sure you get the right answer so you can make the best choice for you. As far as you asked me another question around hiring.
Yeah, sales, if there's certain.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think that any Enneagram type that's healthy can do anything, just like compatibility. Any Enneagram type that is committed to growing the level of health they're at, any of those Enneagram types can work well together. Now, that being said, are some absolutely, it's an easier stretch for them to do? Absolutely. You know, 3s are master salespeople, period, end of story. They are. It's a natural go-to for them. Can a 5 do it? Yes. And they can do it well. Do they love it? Do they enjoy the energy of it? No. But can they? Yes. Can they do it well? Absolutely. But there are certain types where certain things are easier. Like for me, I can like stand in front of a room and just command it, like zero problem. Even if I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, I can naturally do that. Now, if you want me to, curl up in a ball with you in the corner, can I do it? Yeah. Is it my favorite thing to do? No. No. But I learned like over the last decade plus that that's actually where I grow the most. Right? Like being compassionate and in the trenches with people is where I do the most commanding of any room. But it isn't my natural go-to, but I've had to learn. And that's where the framework and understanding my Enneagram type and where I go in certain levels and the subtype. Because in the past, had I just thought or heard that, compassion is like the superpower, I've been like, go F yourself. Like, no. It's power. It's influence. It's all those things. But it wasn't until I was gifted this beautiful gift of the Enneagram where I understood that my growth number is very compassionate and empathetic. And because I'm raising my hand saying I want to grow, even though that makes me really uncomfortable and it is not my favorite thing to do, that is actually where all my power and impact lies. So any type can do anything, but knowing your GPS and where like your growth is and, the target you're aiming for will allow you to get there a hell of a lot faster. It will still never be an easy go-to for you, but it's just like going to the gym and, I love having a little J-Lo booty. I love it. Love it. But it doesn't happen by going to the gym and doing squats one time. Right. I am lifting and putting resistance on it every day. And this emotional intelligence that we're talking about with the Enneagram is just that. I make it sound really easy to talk about, but I've been talking about it and integrating it every single day for over 10 years in my life. And so if you are here to use this tool, use it. Don't just learn about it, but actually use it and practice using it with integrity. It's cool.
Heck yes. No, all right, I've got a question. So if someone, as you offer a variety of tools and options out there that you help business owners and people out with. So my question for you would be, if somebody was wanting, they have a new person they're looking at, they're thinking about, hey, I'm thinking about DISC, whatever. What would be the easiest way for them to maybe give them an Enneagram? Or maybe a business owner right now listening to this is like, man, I really don't know how to communicate to my team. I don't know what triggers them. I don't know how to put them in the best position to be successful. What do you have for options out there for business owners that may be listening to this to where they could get a hold of you, follow you, use your materials, things of that nature?
Well, my thing is like, in order to be an effective leader, you have to really know how to effectively lead yourself. And I don't mean by, the measurement of your bank account or the measurement by the people in the cheering squad. Like, I've had all of those things and knew I was failing miserably as a leader because I wasn't effectively leading myself. So when you understand yourself, you'll understand everything. And you'll be able to connect a lot more dots. You're like, oh, that's why that happens. Oh, that's why that happens. So I would say start with that. And you can do one of two things. Like, obviously, having a guide explain all this to you is ideal. Spend 90 minutes with me. It'll feel like 10 years of therapy. I've heard that over and over and over again in all the good ways, right? It's like, holy crap. Have you been following me around my whole life? That's kind of what it feels like. And I'll give you kind of your GPS and how to use that. Right? It's one thing, information doesn't equal transformation. Integration of the information equals transformation. And having a guide help you is obviously the fast pass to that. I go to Disneyland, I don't wait in lines. Like, I'm not doing it. I buy a chainsaw at Home Depot. I'm having somebody instruct me. I'm not just reading the pamphlet. Right? So obviously having a professional guide kind of explain this to you will fast track your muscle building in this arena. Now, if you are somebody that has even 2 or 3 people working for you, this can prove very valuable. First and foremost, it shows your team and people that you are humble enough to bring a professional in to expose even them. That is probably the greatest gift I've seen CEOs, founders, owners of companies do, is they're not just having me fix their people. They're like saying, I know that I'm part of this. And I've got blind spots, and my people need to know what they are too. And it creates that culture of we're all in this together. So I can come in, I can do workshop style, I can do one-on-one coaching with all your people. I can spend, however I can customize anything. Obviously, the more guidance you get one-on-one with me, the stronger, the faster, and the more powerful this tool becomes in your organization. But even a 3-hour workshop with your team, and then you knowing who's in your team, powerful. Like, when you know what you're working with, like, anything's possible. Anything. Me knowing that I am raising a 2 son and a 7 daughter, which, by the way, there's one of each of us in each center of intelligence. So we have one that operates on instinct, one that operates on feelings, one that operates in their head. Like, when we're all on the same page, my goodness, are we a powerful force, the 3 of us? But back in 2011, we almost killed each other. Mm-hmm. We didn't change, but our understanding of each other has. And when we understand and value each other, team, home, all across the board, even the ladies at the grocery store, or even the people on the freeways that piss us off. Like, there is not a person that I don't meet with compassion today. And that is because of the lens of the Enneagram. Definitely a beautiful tool to bring into your team, organization, or home, for sure, when used right.
Absolutely. It's and look, we have guests on all the time, and I don't put my name on many people's products, but I will 100% put my last name back. Tracy's amazing. So there's a lot of
last name, not your full name.
Put my full name, put my last name, whatever. But here's the thing. Like, we've worked with Tracy. Tracy's amazing, and I understand there's lots of Enneagram specialists out there. But I promise you, if you're wanting to know more about Enneagram, looking to take your culture to the next level, Tracy is someone I would highly recommend reaching out to. And so, Tracy, if somebody wanted to reach out to you, wanted to follow you, what's the best way to do that? And we'll put all this in the show notes as well.
My website is tracyo'malley.com. You can go to the work with me section, send an email. It's just like I said, I can customize anything for your team, your investment budget, whatever that looks like. If you are on Instagram, I'm not the greatest on there, but you can find me at Tracy_O'Malley there. I'm on LinkedIn. Don't do that very well either. But you know what? Like what you just said, I know for an Enneagram 3 to put their name on anything, I don't take that lightly, because a 3 won't put their name on anything that would ever make them look bad, ever. So I take that so seriously, and it's such an honor and privilege to do this work with people, especially people like you. So thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
We love you. This has been so much fun. Thank you for being a part of this. Thank you for listening. Again, if you want to connect with Tracy, tap the show notes. We are going to put all of her social media handles, her website, and then that promo code that we have for you to download your exclusive blueprint, so you understand how to lead yourself, how to use the Enneagram, and how to communicate not only with your family, but your team as well. So thank you so much for listening to the Insurance Buzz. We will catch you on the next one.